All right, I think it's under control. Thank you, Team IT. Well done. Hopefully we'll get through this seamlessly. Welcome to the meeting of Shad and River Herring. We have a fairly quick agenda today with just one action item. Before we go to the agenda, though, I did want to make an announcement that we do have a new legislative appointee from Connecticut. So I wanted to offer Justin Davis the chance to introduce him since everybody is here for this meeting.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, we have a new member of the Connecticut delegation, Representative Joe Gresco, who's sitting over there. Joe is a representative in our Connecticut House from the 121st District, which is a coastal district down in southwestern Connecticut. Joe has also served as the chair of the Environment Committee in the Connecticut General Assembly. So that's the committee that has cognizance of all those matters relating to our Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So had a chance to work with Joe in the past. Mostly it's me sitting on Zoom meetings telling Joe why we can't do something his constituents want because of this group called the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission that gets to make the rules. So happy to have Joe here around the table with us. Also want to acknowledge that there's a familiar face sitting here at the table for Connecticut. It's my understanding Joe has appointed Craig Miner as his ongoing proxy. So Craig will also still be with us here in the Connecticut delegation.
Great, thank you, Justin, and welcome, Joe. Buckle up. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing, well, I just want to introduce, as always, James Boyles is here, Dr. Drew, and Kirby Roots Murdy here to my left, who just couldn't stay away, is back from USGS. So first order of business is approval of the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to change or modify the agenda in any way? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to consider that approved by consent. Does anybody have any edits, changes, or modifications to the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, seeing none, we're going to consider that approved by consent. Next stop on the agenda is public comment. Does anybody have public comment for the Shad and River Herring Management Board? Anybody online, Tony? Okay, we're going to consider no public comment. Okay, and coming up this is our only action item for the meeting, and we are going to consider an update to the Potomac River Fisheries Commission American Shad Sustainable Fishery Management Plan. And I believe Wes Egan is on virtually from New York. Wes, you gonna take it away?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. For those of you that are unfamiliar, I'm Wes Aiken. I'm the TC rep from New York and recently became chair of the Shad and River Herring TC. I'd just like to take a second to thank Brian Nealon from New Jersey, the previous chair, for his leadership over the past 2+ years. Look forward to continuing working with Brian and the rest of the TC members. So yeah, jumping into for your consideration today is the Potomac River Fisheries Commission American Shad SFMP update. Next slide, please. So just a little background, a refresher on what's required of the SFMPs and the FMP definition of sustainability. Amendments 2 and 3 of the Shad and River Herring FMP require states wishing to have fishery submit a sustainable fisheries management plan that will demonstrate their stock could support a commercial and/or recreational fishery that will not diminish the future stock, reproduction, and recruitment. The plans are updated and reviewed by the TC every 5 years to reassess stock status and sustainability. Next slide, please. So back in May, the TC met and we evaluated the PRFC SFMP update. The TC recommended approval of the plan as it was presented with the recommendation of exploring additional sustainability metrics in future plans. Next slide. The PRFC is requesting continuation of their limited commercial bycatch allowance in the portion of the Potomac under the PRFC jurisdiction. As I mentioned, shad are encountered as bycatch in both the pound and gillnet fisheries that are cooperatively managed by the states of Maryland and Virginia. This plan remains unchanged from the previous board-approved plan back in 2017. The management measures the seasons for the pound net fisheries February 15th to December 15th, and the gill net is from November 7th to March 25th. There's a 2 bushel limit per day per licensee, and there's mandatory daily reporting that includes discards as well as live releases. Next slide, please. So this here is essentially getting a bad echo.
Oh my gosh. What do you want me to do?
Everybody all good now? So this here is essentially the mechanics of the plan. The SFMP has a river-specific management unit, the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. to Chesapeake Bay. The sustainability measure is the time series geometric mean CPUE of the pound net landings, catch plus discards. The sustainability target is a fishery dependent target, and it was a restoration target that was set in the 2007 stock assessment, which is 31.1 pounds per net day. The management action threshold would be 3 consecutive years with the geometric mean CPUE below the restoration target, and some potential management actions would be the reduction or elimination of the 2 bushel bycatch allowance and or limiting or restricting the take of broodstock egg collections by other agencies. The PRC currently allows some take of broodstock for hatchery propagation. Next slide, please. And to wrap things up, this graph here just shows the American Shad pound net indice. The blue line there indicates the restoration target, and the more recent time series here in green shows the CPUE of the bycatch and the discards from the pound net fishery, and they have been above their restoration target since 2011. And that is about it for this update. I'll gladly take any questions from the board.
Excellent. Thank you, Wes. Any questions for Wes on this report? Dr. Rhodes.
I believe this was the correction where they're talking about the stocking program and the amount of viable eggs, and it was around 30% that they'd get. Is that about normal for a stocking program, or a little higher or lower? I just didn't know the answer, but I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, I am not sure. I'm not that familiar with stocking or hatchery operations. We don't operate any in New York. I defer to maybe any other board members that have better understanding of the hatchery production.
Marty, Gary, you want to address that?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll try. And Malcolm, I'm not 100% sure. What we've been doing is working cooperatively with groups that have been coming down over the years to collect broodstock. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Virginia Wildlife Resources, DC Fisheries, some NGOs, and asking for some of those fish to be strip spawned and put back. In terms of quantifying, I'm not 100% sure on the contribution. And it varies from year to year quite a bit as to how many of those groups participate. They're all collecting those broodstock around Mount Vernon, that part of the river. But we have had consistency, I think, with Fish and Wildlife Service in Virginia. A lot of those fish go up to the Van Dyke hatchery up in Pennsylvania. So probably not as detailed an answer as you were seeking, but yeah.
Thank you, Marty. Any other questions on the sustainable management plan from Potomac River? Marty.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just for a little more context for the board, the Potomac River Fisheries Commission implemented a moratorium in 1982. Simultaneously, we initiated this bycatch program. So it's been in place for over 4 decades. This is working with specifically our pound net and gill net fisheries in the spring. About 95% of the bycatch is captured in the pound net fishery, which starts a little bit later, like April into May. And that catch in recent years, to give you an idea, was about a little less than 8,000 pounds for both roe and buck shad. The number of participants varies, but it's a low level of participants. Over the last 5 years, the average was 22. So that gives you a little bit more detail on how that bycatch fishery is operating. And the tools that that we're working with the TC to develop and integrate, we're looking at both the Maryland JAI on the Potomac River and also the Maryland DNR gillnet striped bass spawning survey, which captures shad when they're out in April and May working that survey. And the idea would be to integrate that in to the plan and use those as potential trigger mechanisms for management responses. So hopefully that adds a little bit of context to our SFMP. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Marty. Okay, any other questions on this report? And if not, I'm going to be looking for a motion to approve. Justin Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wait to see if staff has a motion prepared.
Does staff have a motion prepared? Okay, we have a motion on the board. Move to approve the Shad Sustainable Fishery Management Plan for Potomac River Fisheries Commission as presented today by Dr. Davis. Do I have a second? Malcolm Rhodes. Okay, is there any discussion on this motion? All right, is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, great. Motion carries by consent. And I guess I'll read it into the record one more time. Move to approve the Shad Sustainable Fishery Management Plan from Potomac River Fisheries Commission as presented today. Great. All right, so the next agenda item, we're going to talk about the U.S. Geological Survey, Holocene Genetic Repository. We've had some conversations about this over past meetings, so Kirby, looking forward to the update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's nice to look around this morning and see a lot of familiar faces. As mentioned, I work for the U.S. Geological Survey's Eastern Ecological Science Center, and today I'm here to provide a short overview of the Holocene Genetic Tissue Repository that's been shepherded by the Eastern Ecological Science Center over the last few years. Move on to the next slide. So to start, as many of you are aware, the efforts to restore American shad and river herring populations are presented with multiple challenges across the coast, from habitat fragmentation to water quality challenges to climate change. In particular, the bycatch of Holocenes in marine and estuarine commercial fisheries presents challenges to recovering spawning populations. Distinguishing stock composition can support efforts to better assess the status and the trends of specific populations. And so today I'll provide an overview of work that the USGS has led to support stock assessment efforts for all three of the Holocene species managed by ASMFC. Next slide. To start, just a little bit more about EESC. We provide a unique role in housing and processing Holocene tissue samples from across the Atlantic coast, across political boundaries and species. And we provide an important service not only in storing these samples, but cataloging them, conducting analyses to better understand the population dynamics of these species. And specific to Holocenes, the objectives guiding our work is to really create a genetic or genomic markers, single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs, to build and expand our information on American shad, blueback herring, and alewife. For river herring species in particular, we're working to characterize populations using SNP baselines augmented with additional samples. For American shad, we are centering our work on developing new SNP panels, which should provide greater resolution of the stock structure, greater repeatability, and also cost savings when compared against other techniques such as microsatellite markers. So what we've done so far is sent out collection samples across the coast from Canada, down through Georgia. In these kits, we've requested data such as species, sampling location, GPS coordinates, as well as size class, so total length, fork length information. Next slide. To highlight some of the work to date, I'm going to start off with American shad, and really this is where we've received the most of our samples. So we've collected approximately 2,280 fin samples. As you can see, we have a good distribution across the coast, all the way up through the Gulf of St. Lawrence down through the Atlantic coast of Florida. And we've been provided these samples from a variety of state agencies, universities, as well as NGOs. Next slide. To hopefully give you a little bit more resolution of understanding which river species in particular, you can see here for American shad, we just have, I think, a very good collection across a lot of these important systems that you all are familiar with. Next slide. Now, moving into more, the river herring species, we have inherently less samples, but starting with alewife, we've received about 981 fin clips. And as you can see, the distribution of these fin clips we've collected really are centered a lot more in the Northeast so far in terms of what we've received. Again, a mix of a variety of state, university, and NGOs. Next slide. And then last, on blueback herring, this is where we've received probably the least amount of samples. So about 218, a greater distance across the coast of samples collected, but a smaller number of river systems. Next slide. So in doing some analysis on the American shad samples that we've collected, there's been an effort to do genotype paneling. And what you can see on the screen right now really are in going through and sequencing, individuals from 12 baseline populations and 2 mixed stock fisheries, one in the Bay of Fundy and one in the Delaware Bay. We've been able to identify 107 microhaplotypes. For American shad in particular, you can see we've got a good sampling or a good collection of samples that are registering a unique or a distinct population marker, for the Miramichi, which is up in Canada. That's in orange in the top kind of right corner. Next, the Annapolis West, which is in Nova Scotia, and then followed by the Santee Cooper and the St. John's River. So that's yellow for the Santee Cooper and brown for the St. John's River. And again, so these are showing us more of a distinct marker and doing the analysis across where these samples have been collected. Next slide. So I'd say one of the really interesting findings so far, and keep in mind these are preliminary results in terms of our analysis, is that in looking at these two, in particular, water bodies where there's been mixed stock sampling, in the Bay of Fundy, what you can see is that fish that originate from the Miramichi River, which empties into the St. Lawrence or the Gulf of St. Lawrence, are being, picked up and found a distinct marker in the Bay of Fundy, which, if you're familiar with some of the geography around there, that means they're going up and around, and you would maybe expect to see more samples popping up from the Annapolis West River, which is emptying directly into the Bay of Fundy there. moving over to the Delaware Bay, kind of a more traditional understanding of, you're seeing fish that are coming out of the Delaware Bay, but also those that originating from the Hudson as well as the Potomac. So again, these are preliminary analysis we've been able to do on American shad in large part because of the volume of samples we've received and the emphasis we've been directed to focus on for that species given I believe the former TUG's guidance. So in summary, a lot of this work with American shad samples has been done in terms of the analysis in coordination with Cornell University colleagues. And on the river herring side of things, we are really looking for more fin clips that we could get from across the coast to further pursue more analysis and hopefully get a better ability to evaluate some of these mixed stock fisheries and the origin of some of those fish that are being found in them. So if you have samples, please send them to my colleague, Molluska. She was not able to be here today, but I want to highlight her as well as Dave Kazak. Those are our two kind of principal investigators at USGS EESC who are spearheading this Holocene genetic tissue repository work. And last slide, just if you are interested in learning more about this research, please, you can look at this QR code, take a picture of it. It'll direct you directly to our website and you can get some more detailed information. So with that, I will try to answer any questions you have to the best of my ability. So thanks.
Thanks, Kirby. That's fascinating. That stuff and the telemetry array of work, I just find that completely fascinating. So thank you, John Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kirby. I'm just curious on the shad, being that there have been stocking programs going on for a bunch of years and some of them have been between watersheds. Is that affecting these genetic samples in any way?
I don't know, but I can ask my colleagues and we can see if we can get some more information on that.
Don Maniscalco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just answer that a little bit. A lot of the shad work was done by academics at Cornell University, and not that I understand the real specifics, but the genetic techniques they're using are aimed at identifying recent changes. And the reason why they went with this was specifically because trying to disentangle stocking from and being able to identify, stock from different river systems. So without having it definite, I would say yes, it can deal with the stocking issue.
Any other questions, sir?
Kirby, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Is there a target number of samples per water body you're shooting for? And that might help inform how the members of the commission can work with their staffs to assist you.
Thanks for the question, Rick. I don't know. It's a great question. And hopefully I can get some more information on it. I will say that, again, from what I'm aware of, we need to get more samples from across the coast. And I think trying to time up when these kits are sent out and hopefully used for spring surveys might allow us to kind of get to a plethora, hopefully, of samples to pull from. But this year, timing wise, we just didn't quite match up as well as I would have hoped. But I will ask my colleagues about a specific target number per river systems, unless ASMFC staff have any suggestions. No. All right.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Lustig, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kirby, for that interesting report. A number of years ago, I personally did a lot of fishing down below the Conowingo Dam on the Susquehanna River, and I've always wondered about the status of the hickory shad, which precedes in migration the American shad. You mentioned the congenital work on river herring. Is there any work anticipated on the status of the hickory shad? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lauren. I'm not aware of any specific work on hickory shad. Again, my understanding is former TUG kind of helped direct where some of the efforts have been between these three species. And so I'm not sure if they have discussed hickory shad as one to further evaluate. None.
Okay, Justin Davis, I see you. I'm going to go to Wes quickly online because I think he's got some commentary to add.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to provide some information on the sample size and what was being requested. At our last TC meeting, we discussed this topic, and I think the request was 50, ideally, minimum of 30. USGS staff had offered to provide those kits, and it was well received by TC members as far as collecting those samples. There was also a request to get either multiple years to try to get that stability of the genetic signals, and then an effort to collect more mixed stock samples where those might be available. And one such place was a fishery in Virginia, I believe, that had encountered a lot of American shad bycatch last year. So there's going to be an effort this coming spring to work with the fishers from that fishery to collect some samples there.
Thanks, Wes. And Kirby has a follow-up to that.
Yeah, thank you, Wes, for that insight. I will note, if you go back to slide 4, in terms of these kits we've sent out, they have 50 vials. So, sending up to 50 samples with each of these kits would be great if you can get up to that. But.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go to the AP chair also online, Pam, and then I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me okay.
Gotcha, loud and clear.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Kirby, for this presentation. It's a very interesting project and one I've been trying to stay up to speed on. I was looking at where you've requested samples, and I'm wondering, have you requested samples from the Northeast Fisheries Observer Program for the bycatch that occurs at sea in the federal fisheries? I didn't see it listed.
Yes, thanks for the question. I believe we have received some samples, and they've gone into some of the analysis. So I was shouldn't have admitted that from the presentation, but yes, we've been getting some samples from them as well.
Okay, thank you, Kirby. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Pam kind of got to what I was going to ask is, to what degree is USGS planning on participating in any efforts to sort of better characterize the genetic composition of bycatch occurring in offshore commercial fisheries?
I would say, it's an area of interest of ours. We, like so many, projects that we're somewhat limited, just frankly, based on funding. So if we can find the ability to allocate and pursue more funding around that, we will absolutely be able to and be interested in doing that kind of work. But that's our limiting factor right now.
Okay, thank you, Kirby. Any other? Oh, and I'm going to turn back to Wes Egan.
Thank you. I was just going to add to the bycatch question. That is the impetus of the work with Cornell University, specifically with American shad. That's the goal there, is to quantify the species or the stock composition of that bycatch. One of the challenges that we've been encountering getting the mixed stock samples from the federal fisheries is that there's such low observer coverage in some of the high volume fisheries, the herring and mackerel fisheries. So that's been a little bit of a hurdle for us. We do have samples in hand. I don't know the total amount to date. We just got some samples last week, I do believe. So that is an effort, but there is a little bit of a hurdle there with low observer coverage.
Thank you, Wes. I guess I have one question about that. Do the samples need to be taken by observers, or would industry cooperate to provide samples on their own?
That's a good question. We haven't explored that option, but that is something that we would definitely pursue if we feel that that's a viable option.
Yeah, it seems like that might be worth an ask. Okay, and Pat Kelleher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kirby, the sampling kits are $65. I mean, the state of Maine could certainly provide samples for at least 18 distinct runs for river herring, blueback herring, as well as expand some of your shad work in a few of the smaller rivers. But so we should talk about that. And just for the record, so our Canadian friends are not upset, it's Miramichi. Just, I don't, just to put you on the spot. But.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelleher.
Glad we got that straight. Okay, any other questions on this topic? Is there anybody online? Okay, all right, great stuff. Okay, so next, last up, we're gonna go to Dr. Katie Drew to get a progress update on the 2024 river herring benchmark assessment. Take it away, Katie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll keep this brief. This was brought to the policy board at our last meeting because the Shad and River Herring Board did not meet, but I'm informing you all again, in case there was not enough overlap, that the assessment has been delayed by one meeting cycle. So our original goal was to have this peer reviewed essentially now and presented at our annual meeting. We will be aiming now to have this peer reviewed in late November, early December to present at the winter meeting of next year. We just needed some additional time to continue work on this assessment. We'll be having our assessment workshop in person, actually in this very hotel, the week of August 21st, to kind of hopefully step back and reevaluate our progress on the assessment work itself, and hopefully be able to start transitioning into finalizing those analyses and writing this up in order to meet our current peer review goal. So that's just an update on the schedule and what's happening next. And I'm happy to take any questions about the assessment.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Drew? Questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Katie. Our final agenda item is other business. Does anybody have anything else to bring before the board? Okay, excellent. And with that, I think I will submit as chair a motion to adjourn. And if anybody objects, please say so now. Otherwise, we're adjourned.